In the first few seasons of VGC, getting good competitive Pokemon was literally impossible. If my last few videos on team building have proven anything to you, it should be that players had to jump through a ridiculous amount of hoops to get them. Be it glitching, hacking, or RNG manipulation, it is clear that normal gameplay was not the answer to this problem. Because of this, hacking was extremely prevalent in the first few years of VGC, to the point where it just became accepted that you have to hack if you want to compete at a fair playing field. This was the fault of none other than Game Freak and the Pokemon Company International. Thanks to a combination of difficult in-game mechanics and non-existent hack checks, cheaters ran rampant. So starting with Gen 6, they decided to make some improvements to various team building mechanics in the hopes that this would slow down the hacking and make people play more legitimately. But was this enough? A lot of people seem to think Gen 6 made meaningful improvements. So to test this idea out, I'll be recreating Wolf Glick's 2016 world-winning team from nothing without any hacks. In addition, I'll be comparing the time each section where I catch or train Pokemon took to the time it took me to build the first ever restricted World Championship team, Ray Rizzo's from 2010. So if you haven't seen me take on that challenge, check it out first. I'll be building this team from scratch on a mostly completed copy of Alpha Sapphire. I say mostly because you actually can't access several post-game things without completing the Delta episode, including the Battle Resort, and you also can't KO Rayquaza and do this later. The IVs, EVs, natures, moves, and items will be fully identical to Wolf's team. My goal in these videos is always to capture the experience of a casual fan wanting to try out VGC for the first time, and to try and show what Game Freak thinks is acceptable insofar as team construction goes, and I'm just using his team as an example for what was a good team. So with that said, I am not allowing the use of any glitches. Gen 6 doesn't have many glitches, but there is a duplication glitch that exists if you turn the game off while trading. In addition, I could benefit from cloning in older gens and trading them up, so I won't be doing that either. I also am not allowing myself to use Pokemiles or BP from Pokebank. This is because I have far more Pokemon in my bank than any reasonable casual player would for Gen 6, with literally thousands of rejects from XY, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Moon, and even Gold Silver Crystal. I'd be getting BP/Pokemiles at a rate that is too quickly for what was available back then, but I'll touch more on this later. Alright, what am I allowing then? Well, of course I'll be RNG manipulating everything I can, because I'm me. It speeds things up and is also not a glitch or a malfunction. In addition, while Gen 6 VGC doesn't allow you to compete with Pokemon from non-Gen 6 games in the battles, you can still send up old gen Pokemon via bank for various purposes such as breeding, so I think allowing that is fine as well. Lastly, Wolf's Raichu was an event that was only available in 2015, so I have to use a hack to give myself the wonder card for it. Don't worry, I'm not actually hacking the Pikachu in, this just puts it at the delivery lady where I can then soft reset for it. So I'll still have to do the work of getting the stats and nature I want on it myself. Lastly, I am going to try and build this team as quickly and as efficiently as I can. I'll be running a live timer in the upper right hand corner of the screen at all times, keeping track of how long each section generally took me. Without further ado, let's begin my setup. The first thing I had to do was get Wolf's team. Luckily, it's extremely well documented on a YouTube video he made himself, and I encourage you to check that video out. It is unbelievably informative for how a competitor has to account for all sorts of things like different strategies and damage ranges. It's sort of the opposite of this video really, where I just talk about making the team in the game itself. I couldn't find a Pokepaste for it anywhere though, so I made one based off of the video for convenience as a quick reference, and here it is on screen now. Then I reached out to Wolf and Marcus, who both made the team together, for some questions about it and team building in general in the 6th generation. Marcus got back to me saying everything here is from memory from way back then, so it might not be 100% accurate. But first I asked him if he'd like to comment on how difficult or easy he thought constructing the team in-game was, and when was the team finalized before a tournament. He said about 4 to 5 weeks before the tournament they knew which Pokemon to use, and then they finalized the EV spreads later. He also said he had several people helping him to build and acquire the Pokemon, so it wasn't just himself, and he can't comment on how long building the team alone would take. I also asked how important some of the niche IVs are for their team, like the 0 attack Gengar, 0 attack Kyogre, and the 31 attack Raichu. I understand that these are optimizations to reduce confusion and foul play damage, as well as enhance Raichu's chip damage with Fake Out and Nuzzle, but I feared I would not be able to build the team very quickly if I had to aim for these specific targets. Marcus said that obviously that these optimizations are important, but he doesn't think Kyogre or Gengar got hit with a single foul play the entire tournament, and that all in all he would say that the reason they were successful wasn't because of their flawless IVs, but the near perfect predictions that they made for what the metagame would look like at Worlds, and their plans that they had prepared versus major archetypes and their execution and adaptation during the tournament whenever they faced something that they didn't account for. I'd like to thank Marcus for taking the time to answer the questions that I had. This video would not be possible without him and Wolf, so if everyone could show some appreciation to them, that would be great. Now that I have the team documented and my questions about it answered, we can move on to actually acquiring the Pokemon from the team. The first thing I have to do is get a bunch of old Ambers, the fossil used to revive Aerodactyl. If I were to RNG manip every single Pokemon on the team, the minimum I would need is 7. I'll explain that later. Now, while I might not do that, I go ahead and get 7 old Ambers anyway, just in case. I do this by finding a Mirage Mountain Mirage spot and rock smashing the rocks there. You just go in and out of it to respawn all the rocks, and doing this took about 25 minutes total. Next up, I need some lucky eggs for leveling up quickly. I want 5 of them minimum, as I think that's probably the best for batch leveling. I do this by farming Pelipers using the Dex Nav feature. I KO enough of them to have it reveal their item to me, and then I start chaining using Thief and take a lucky egg whenever they have one. This is a 5% chance, so it took a while, and about 45 minutes later, I had all the lucky eggs that I needed. After that, I catch a bunch of Zigzagoons with pickup, and then I start grinding them until they're level 41 to 50. I do this using the Blisy bases. Now, you may notice that the Blissys are the incorrect level. They're only level 50. This is because I have not yet finished the Delta episode. You see, to use the level release in these bases, you need to actually unlock it for yourself, but you can't unlock that until you get to the Battle Resort, which you can't do until you've beaten the Delta episode. But you can't beat the Delta episode without catching Rayquaza, who I need for this team. So I am stuck in this weird limbo state in-game right now, where I can't rematch the Elite Four, I can't fight level 100 Blissys, and I can't access the better daycare for the easy breeding loop. This is extremely annoying. Anyway, with that mini rant aside, catching and leveling all these Zigzagoons took me 52 minutes. With all my Ziggies at the proper level, I have to do a bunch of pickup farming. I need about 30 rare candies in order to perform the RNG manips in this game. I know, it sounds weird, but I promise I'll explain everything when we get to RNGing Rayquaza itself. So I just ran around a lot and spam pick up rare candies until I had about 20 or so. This took me 4 hours and 46 minutes. It seems like a lot, I know, but this was actually extremely helpful. I got a ton of other really useful items this way. During the farming, I got 8 heart scales, 3 destiny knots, and a bunch of evolution stones and revives. The heart scales will cut down on love disc farming later, and the destiny knot is an absurdly rare item in this game that is extremely useful for breeding. And the evo stones and healing items I sold for money. After I had all 20 rare candies, I then went around and picked up all the overworld candies just sitting on the floor in the game. With my total of 34 rare candies, I'm now sitting at 7 hours and 55 minutes of gameplay so far. The final prep step for now is to get a modest and jolly synchronizer. I do this by dex naving Ralts until I have what I need. This took a truly absurd amount of time. There really isn't anything interesting or unique here. DexNav tells me if their ability is synchronized, and if it is, I catch them. And almost an entire full box of Ralts later, I had the 2 natures that I needed. In addition, because I did this with my full team of Ziggs, I farmed a few more rare candies, and I'm now sitting at 39 of them. This took me 1 hour and 49 minutes. All in all, the total prep time for this before we caught any Pokemon is 9 hours and 45 minutes. With all my prep work done, we can move on to catching Rayquaza, the first member of the team. To catch it, I'll be using a technique known as RNG manipulation. Many of you may think this is akin to glitching or hacking, but allow me to explain using this Rayquaza as an example to show you why it's different. So, because computers are not great at producing true random, the 3DS included, Game Freak uses what's known as a pseudo-random number generator, which is an algorithm that takes in an input and uses it to produce a string of numbers that appear to the end user as random. In fact, they don't just use one pseudo-random number generator, they use 2 different ones that matter to us. Then, on top of that, they use several different techniques and tricks to make both of them extremely difficult to manipulate. The first one is what's known as the main RNG. It uses a Mersenne Twister algorithm, a pretty old formula developed in 1997. The game takes in the date and time down to the millisecond and also takes in a hidden value known as the save variable, which is a random value generated the last time you saved your game. Then it combines these 2 things to form your initial seed and puts that seed into the MT algorithm to start the randomization process when you push A on the title screen. Then, from there, it advances this RNG state every 1/60th of a second. Because we cannot know for certain our save parameter, and 1 millisecond precision is not exactly easy for a human to do, we cannot actually feasibly control our initial seed for the main RNG. So what we have to do is find it. The way this works is we load up the game, then we revive 2 Aerodactyls in quick succession of each other and find their exact IVs. Using this info, we can brute force our initial seed. This is what the rare candies and Old Ambers are for. I specifically use Old Amber because Aerodactyl, thanks to being a fully evolved Pokemon, takes the least number of level ups to determine its exact IVs, usually no more than 8 candies. This brute force can take a very long time, up to 30 minutes usually, but for Rayquaza this time I got lucky and it took around 9 minutes. Once we have the full RNG seed, as long as we do not save, it will be incremented predictably and linearly by milliseconds only, because the save variable won't change. Subsequent searches from here only require 1 Aerodactyl and usually only take a few seconds and 4 to 5 are rare candies tops. And these quick searches are how you do the RNG manipulations. The way they work is I start a timer that counts up at the same time as I press A on the title screen. Then I do a quick search and I find my seed. Once I have my seed, I use 3DS RNG Tool, which is a big calculator similar to Pokefinder, to see if there's any good Rayquazas nearby my current time. If there are, I run to Rayquaza and stand in front of them with a synchronizer. Then, as long as my target Rayquaza is further away than my current time, I can input its advance amount into my timer and I simply wait. Then, when my timer gets close, it beeps to let me know and I press A on the final beep to try and time it properly. Remember, this is a 1/60th of a second window. So I press A and I check my Rayquaza and yes, all 31 IVs. What? Bashful nature? Remember, I said there are 2 RNGs that matter to us. The second RNG is what's known as Tiny MT, and it advances every time you take a step in the grass, you or an NPC blink, or your character does an idle animation. It controls what Pokemon show up in a wild battle, and if a synchronization happens to a Pokemon. Tiny MT is a new small-size variant of Mersenne Twister introduced by Matsuo Saito and Makoto Matsumoto in 2011. In-game, it is seeded by just the date and time down to the millisecond when the game is launched. While this is controllable to us, it is exceedingly difficult for me to manage manipulating both Tiny MT and MT at the same time. I'd have to find my MT seed, run to Rayquaza, and then watch my Pokemon blink to find the Tiny seed. Then I'd have to manipulate my Tiny state using items to where it would cause a synchronization to occur. Then I would have to press A at the right time. The resets are already 4 to 6 minutes on average, and this would only extend them. Plus, all the NPCs in front of Rayquaza would have the ability to blink and mess up my state in the moments I'm pressing A on the cutscene here. So I thought it wasn't even worth it to try this. So I had to do the RNG again. But finally, after an agonizing 10 hours, I got the Rayquaza. 31 in all stats except special attack and a jolly nature. Now, I know what you're thinking. 10 hours? Surely you can soft reset faster than that. Rayquaza has 3 guaranteed 31 IVs after all, and with Synchronized being a 50-50 in this game, it can't be that bad, right? Well, let's break down the odds of getting a Rayquaza and on average how long it would take you to soft reset until you got one. From cutscene to stat check, it takes about 1 minute to see if your Rayquaza is the proper one. Now, the odds of this specific Ray showing up using Synchronize are 1 out of 3,677, calculated by my friend Xiao as seen here. After 5,000 resets, you'd only be at a 75% chance to see this specific Rayquaza. To do that many resets, this would take you 83 hours of playtime. Sure, you could get it in less than 10 hours if you're lucky, but also you could get it in longer than 83 hours if you're unlucky. This is why I RNG manipulate. I prefer my skill, knowledge, and execution to be rewarded over pulling a slot machine for 83 hours. And I think 10 hours is pretty good for such a difficult manip. Well, with Rayquaza done, we can move on to the next member of the team, Raichu. This RNG manip is done the same way as Rayquaza, except there's no Synchronize, and only 2 of the IVs are guaranteed to be 31 instead of 3. You'd think this would be better, since there's no random Synchronize to go wrong, but you would be so wrong. We have just traded one type of pain for another. You see, before for Rayquaza, I'd get my seed, run to Ray, try and hit my target, and if I missed, I'd try again. But Raichu is considerably rarer than Ray. The odds of this Raichu appearing are 1 in 1,209,895. The odds of getting this Raichu after 1 million checks is only 56%. Yeah, its checks would be a lot faster. Let's give it a conservative 20 seconds, but that would still take 5,500 hours, aka 243 days. Missing the 1 extra guaranteed IV that Rayquaza has and having a 1 out of 25 shot of the nature appearing instead of praying for the coin flip success of Synchronize means oftentimes a Raichu wouldn't even appear without a 30-minute wait. So I'd sit there resetting for a good seed for upwards of 40 minutes sometimes. And on many seeds, there wouldn't even be a Raichu until an hour in. On occasion, I did see a Raichu right at the start of the game, but most of the time I'd have to wait a minimum of 7 minutes. And oftentimes, I'd aim for frames about 30 minutes in, which ended up being when I got the Raichu on. All in all, it took me 15 hours. Infinitely faster than the 5,500 hours, I would say, wouldn't you? Before we move on to our next target, do you want to learn how to do these miserable RNG manips in Gen 6? Well, good news everybody, I'll be releasing a set of Gen 6 retail RNG guides during October. There's tons more you can do with RNG in these games, and I'll be covering Wild RNG, Shiny Legends, and more. In addition, I streamed most of the process for this team right here on YouTube, so consider dropping a like and sub if you want to catch me during the next challenge live. After Raichu, there was nothing more that I wanted to do than another one of these miserable, tedious Gen 6 RNGs. But I couldn't. You see, I had used my Master Ball on Rayquaza, and I really didn't want to do a Kyogre manip without one. So I turned to manipping the lottery in Gen 6 to win another Master Ball. And actually, it's hilariously easy. So in most games, you've got to save before doing the lottery, or maybe the lottery is chosen randomly the moment you speak to the clerk. But here, nope, it's chosen in advance. And it also doesn't save when you get a ticket, meaning that you can check what the lottery number is, reset the game, and then RNG a trainer ID that will win you that ticket using another game, and then you can just trade the Pokemon over. So that's what I did, and I did this in Gen 5 using RNG manipulation there. I won't go too in-depth on this since I already made an entire video on team building in Generation 5 that you can watch, but the short of it is, Gen 5 also uses MT RNG, except it is fully controlled by date and time down to only the second, and then it only moves forward when it needs to instead of at a 60 frame per second rate, like when a chat.cry changes its pitch, or when an NPC moves in a random direction. So this is fully controllable by the player. So I use this technique to get the trainer ID I want, and I play until I'm capable of trading, which is after saving Muna from the Dream Yard. Then I trade it to another Gen 5 game where I RNG manip 2 different Dittos. One is a 6 IV Ditto for general purpose breeding, and the other one has 4 perfect IVs in HP, attack, defense, and special defense, and a 0 in speed. This Ditto is for Bronzor. Bronzor. I chose to RNG manip Dittos in this gen instead of Gen 6 for a few reasons. First of all, it's actually literally what I did in 2014 once Bank was out. Second, while you can get 3 IV Dittos pretty easily, everyone back then was just getting them off of the Breeding Dittos Reddit, or trading for Breejecks to boost their speed. Lastly, I have Pokerus in this game, and I also traded that up in the form of some Roggenrollas. I felt it was fair to use Gen 5 for all of this, because to me, this is in lieu of a thriving Gen 6 community. Back then, you'd be wonder trading every day, going on our Breeding Dittos, etc. You'd be able to get a 6 IV Ditto without too much hassle, and would probably have Pokerus from that too. Not to mention all the useful Breejecks you would have. On top of all of this, this mimics my personal experience. I had gotten Pokerus in Gen 4 in 2007, and I genuinely traded that and some RNG manip Dittos up to Gen 6 once Pokebank opened up. Anyway, I trade them all up using Poketransporter, and then I talk to the clerk with my Tepig from Gen 5, and I get a Master Ball for Kyogre. All of this took me 1 hour and 44 minutes. Well, I can't put it off any longer. I guess it's time to RNG manip Kyogre. Kyogre is a good example for me to talk about why these RNG manips take so long. You might have done Gen 3 RNG before, which is also 1/60th of a second precision, and it doesn't take you 15 hours to do that, right? Well, there's 2 reasons for this. The first is that the RNG in Gen 6 isn't the most stable. There are several factors for why this is as well. The first is that the 3DS's processing power isn't really that strong, and if the game lags or slows down, it can cause you to be slightly off of your target. Kyogre's cutscene is particularly notable for this, causing the 3DS to lag, making the cutscene take a bit longer than last time, and making me miss my target. Secondly, the advancement rate changes depending on where you are. It always effectively consumes 60 frames per second, but sometimes it shifts between doing 2 frames at a time or 1 frame at a time. Third, the random dex nav spawns actually advance a random amount between like 50 and 100 frames, and this can make the RNG wildly inconsistent. The other main issue is that, well, attempts take a long time. I have to revive and calculate Aerodactyl's IVs, and that usually takes about a minute or so, and then I have to run to my target location, which can take even longer. Kyogre's minimum target time after all of that is about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That means if I'm as fast as possible, that's the shortest one attempt could take. With that said, Kyogre took me 12 hours. At least it was faster than Raichu, right? Okay, we have the 3 non-breedables done, and I have to prep for the breeds. So I need to breed a Tyrogue, Bronzor, and Ghastly. They're all pretty breezy too, since there's no egg moves or hidden abilities required. And I was actually unsure as to what would be faster, breeding or RNG manipping these eggs. So I thought I would do a little bit of an experiment. I'd get a Bronzor and a Tyrogue, and after they were all ready for breeding, I'd breed Bronzor normally, and then I would RNG manip Tyrogue and compare which was faster. After that, I would use whichever method was faster on the Ghastly breed. First, I needed to get the parents. Bronzor and Tyrogue are both dex nav spawns only, and for Tyrogue, I just chained until I got one with Guts. For Bronzor, I chained until I had one with Levitate and a Sassy Nature. Luckily, thanks to farming 30 Ralts, I already had a Sassy Synchronizer, so it didn't take that long. I also picked up the Everstone during this period of time, and I already had the Destiny Knot from earlier pickup grinding. Oh, and I also unlocked the level release, so now Blisy bases are level 100. This took about an hour and a half. My first breed was Bronzor. I chose this one because I wanted to relax a bit, as the length and difficulty of these RNG manips had been really wearing me down. Breeding in this game is pretty seamless, assuming you have a good Ditto. Basically, in previous games, only a maximum of 3 IVs from the parents would pass down, making it so even if you had 2 6 IV parents, you still had to get pretty lucky for a 5 or 6 IV Pokemon. But starting here, if one parent is holding the Destiny Knot, parents can now pass down 5 of their IVs collectively, which make it inevitable with chain breeding that you'll get a 5 IV eventually. In addition, the Everstone in this game is a 100% chance to pass on the parent's nature who holds it, which means that the only random luck I am dealing with is the IVs and the ability. And even then, the ability is a 60% chance to match that of the female/non-Ditto parent. So all I have to do is drop Bronzor and Ditto off at the daycare, make an egg, and if the egg's IVs are better than my current Bronzor, I swap the new Bronzor out from the old one. Rinse and repeat until I had a 4 IV 0 speed Sassy Bronzor. This took about an hour. I will say this, an hour might be too long for actual competitive play, but it's just a relaxing process for me. I enjoyed vegging out and just getting all the eggs. Tyrogue is up next, and the reason I chose to RNG Tyrogue is because this definitely would have been the most annoying regular breed. I would have had to evolve it every single time I wanted to use a new Tyrogue as a parent, which is mildly annoying. With RNG, you only ever receive 1 egg, so I wouldn't have to do that. Anyway, the first thing I have to do is calc the exact IVs of my Tyrogue. This is so that when I'm doing the RNG, I can accurately find out which advance I hit. I just spammed rare candies until I had the IVs, and then I reset so I didn't lose the rare candies permanently. After that, I evolved the Tyrogue and put it in the daycare with the 6 IV Ditto. I'm actually intentionally not using an Everstone for this, which I'll explain in a moment. Once they are in the daycare, I have them make an egg and I leave to go find my seed using the usual process. So the way this RNG manip works is very similar to the other RNGs I've done. It's a 60 frames per second timer, and a new egg is formed when I reject the old egg. I only have to time the final final button press for the last bit of dialogue where the kid says he'll keep the egg. The game stores the RNG when I press A and it uses it for the next one. Here, I'll show you why I don't use an Everstone. You see, I need an adamant Tyrogue, and really without an Everstone, every nature shows up plentifully since there's so many different frames. I can always find an adamant nature around 2 minutes 45 seconds to 3 minutes in. But the way the RNG process works is that when I miss my target, I need to figure out how far away I was from it so I can calibrate. If I have a 100% chance to pass down my nature and only one of my IVs doesn't come from my parents, I really only have one IV and ability to determine what target I hit. That is not enough information for me to work with. And on top of that, I think using no Everstone still gave me a run almost every single reset, so it's not like it wasted any time. With that said, this still took a really long time, about 4 hours and 50 minutes. So I think regular breeding is decisively the winner here, and I'll be using it for my Ghastly. Ghastly, surprisingly, is not available in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire at all, so I have to get it in my Y version. Well, I'm actually catching a Haunter, but whatever. So I first have to catch a Timid Haunter, which I do using a Synchronizer. Then I trade it over to Alpha Sapphire and I start my breed. It's the exact same process as Bronzor, and from catching the parent Haunter to hatching, the whole process took about 54 minutes. Another fun veg out egg hatching session. Catching all of my Pokemon took an alarming 47 hours and 8 minutes. And if I'm honest, I think this is pretty fast, especially for the legendaries and the Raichu. In Gen 4, catching and breeding every single Pokemon took me 6 hours and 29 minutes, an almost unbelievable difference. The RNG process in Gen 4 is just so much quicker, and that really makes the difference here. This makes our total an unbelievable 56 hours and 56 minutes. I guess it's time to EV train now? So before I can actually start EV training, I have to do the obligatory grind for the power items. These are items that enhance the amount of EVs you get from KOing Pokemon and really speed up EV training. For some unfortunate reason, Game Freak seems intent on making you collect 96 BP with crappy Pokemon before you can EV train. And EV training would let you get BP quicker, so it is just a vicious cycle. Now, the good news is that this was extremely quick by Pokemon standards anyway. Each victory for the first 10 wins gives you 1 BP. Then each victory from 11 through 19 gives you 2 BP. And then if you beat the head of the Maison, you get 20. I went with my Story, Latias, Swampert, and Swellow. This took me about 2 hours and 14 minutes total to grind for. Still, a completely pointless barrier to entry, even if it was better than before. The next thing I needed to do was quickly catch a Pokemon with Sweet Scent, which only took 2 minutes. The reason I need a Sweet Center? Well, for Horde battles. Before I actually go over what I did for each Pokemon, I'll give you a quick rundown of how EV training works in Gen 6 and how I EV train specifically. You see, in this game, you can use Wings, Vitamins, Super Training, Core Training, and Horde Training. But here's the skinny. Horde Training is the only one worth your time. Wings are random drops and only give you 1 EV each. Not worth it, too annoying. Vitamins are extremely expensive and will give you 10 EVs per use, up to 100 EVs on a given stat. But they really only save a few battles and some travel time, and in my opinion, aren't worth the money grind that they would require. Super Training might seem appealing, but it takes a really long time, and it can only give you increments of 4, 8, or 12 EVs based on which regiment you do, so it's also not worth it. Core Training can only be done with the punching bags you unlock from Super Training, and they can give you 1, 4, or 12 EVs each. This can be useful, but it also really takes a long time, and if I'm not doing Super Training, I won't have any bags. And also, which bags you get are random, so this is also not very helpful. And lastly, there's Horde Training. With the proper setup, you can get 50 EVs per battle with Horde Training, and they take a minute tops. This is so fast, it's not even worth it to use Vitamins. If you're going for 252 in a stat, aka max EVs, you only need to do 6 battles for that stat. So what's the setup then? First, make sure you have a Pokemon with the move Sweet Scent. This lets you trigger a Horde battle on command. A Horde battle is a 1v5 against wild Pokemon, and usually they're pretty low level. For example, if we're going to train attack, we would want to fight a Shuppet Horde. Shuppet gives 1 EV of attack each, so if we KO all 5 Shuppet, we gain 5 EVs of attack from that battle. Then make sure you've got a power item that enhances the same stat of the Pokemon you're KOing. In our Shuppet example, we'd be wearing the Power Bracer. This gives us 4 EVs every time we KO a Pokemon. So in our Shuppet example, we now gain 5 attack EVs per KO instead of 1, and adding it all up means we'd get 25 EVs instead of 5 from this battle. To round it all up, if the Pokemon we are training has Pokerus, a rare affliction that doubles the amount of EVs you gain from battle, we would gain 50 EVs from that battle instead of 25. Pokerus is really rare. It's a 1 in 21,845 chance to get. But as I said earlier, this is something that you could get easily from the online community, and I just traded it up from an older game where I already had it. Luckily, there's a consistent Horde for every single stat, so I'll go over what locations I used for them. For HP, I use Sweet Scent in Rusturf Tunnel for Hordes of Whismur. For attack, I use Sweet Scent in Mount Pyre's interior for Hordes of Shuppet. For defense, I use Sweet Scent on Route 111 for Hordes of Sandshrew. For special attack, I use Sweet Scent on Route 119 for Hordes of Oddish. For special defense, I use Sweet Scent on Route 114 for Hordes of Swablu, and for speed, I used Sweet Scent on Route 104 for hordes of Zigzagoon, Tailo, and Wingull. They all give speed. Lastly, for my training technique, it was pretty simple. I gave a Pokemon the power item it needed and turned on the EXP share, so none of my Pokemon even had to battle. I did all the training with my Swampert from the story as my lead. He had both Earthquake and Rock Slide, so he could easily KO all 5 Pokemon at once, and I would use the remaining PP of his moves to keep count of how many KOs I had done. With that, let's go one by one through all the Pokemon I trained. For Rayquaza, its EV spread is 4 HP, 252 attack, and 252 speed. So I equipped the Power Bracer and KO'd 5 hordes of Shuppet, and then 1 Shuppet without the Bracer. Then I equipped the Power Anklet and KO'd 5 hordes of Zigzagoon, and then 1 Zig without the Anklet. Lastly, I just KO'd 1 horde of Whismur to cap off my EVs, and this took me 19 minutes total. For Kyogre, its EV spread is 204 HP, 204 defense, 44 special attack, 4 special defense, and 52 speed. So I KO'd 4 Whismur hordes and then 2 extra Whismur. Then I did the same but with Sandshrew for defense. For special attack, I KO'd 4 individual Oddish in a horde, and then I took off the Power Lens and KO'd 2 more Oddish. Then I did 1 horde for Zigzagoons for speed, and 1 extra without the Anklet. And last, I KO'd a horde of Swablu to fill the rest of the EVs up. Kyogre took a bit longer at 21 minutes, probably on account of the more varied EV spread. Pikachu was next, and its EV spread is 36 HP, 204 defense, 20 special attack, 68 special defense, and 180 speed. So I KO'd 4 Sandshrew hordes and then 2 extra Sandshrew. Then I KO'd 2 Oddish, and after that it was 1 horde of Swablu and then 4 individual Swablu without the lens. Then I KO'd 2 Zigzagoon hordes and 3 Zigzagoon independently afterwards. And lastly, I KO'd a horde of Oddish. In total, Pikachu took me 25 minutes. Bronzor was thankfully another very simple EV spread, with 252 HP, 68 defense, and 188 speed. A simple matter. I KO'd 5 Whismur hordes and 1 Whismur without the weight, and then 1 Sandshrew horde and 4 Sandshrew without the belt. And lastly, I KO'd 4 hordes of Swablu to fill up the remainder of the EVs. Tyro was a bit more of a weird process. His EVs are 252 HP, 132 attack, 76 defense, 44 special defense, and 4 speed. He also has this unique evolution method where which of the Hitmons he evolves into is based on what his attack and defense stats are. For him to evolve into a Hitmontop, he's got to have an attack and defense stat be equal. So I first trained him in HP, KOing 5 Whismur hordes and 1 Whismur without the weight on. Then I got him to his evolution level using Blisy bases, or I should say way past his evolution level. Then I checked his stats to see how far apart they were. 2 points. So what I did was use an online stat calculator to see how many defense EVs I had to give him to make defense and attack equal. It looks like I needed 40 defense points. So I KO'd 4 Sandshrews with the power belt on and then gave him a rare candy, and he was now a Hitmontop. After that, I finished off the defense EV training by KOing 3 Sandshrews with the bracer and 3 without. Then I did 2 hordes of Shuppet, KO'd 3 individual Shuppet, and then I did 1 final Shuppet without the bracer. Then I KO'd 2 individual Zigzagoons for speed EVs, and then I finished the training with a horde of Swablu. Tyro took a total of 36 minutes, pretty much entirely because of the evolution detour. Last up was Ghastly, who had an EV spread of 92 HP, 20 defense, 172 special attack, 4 special defense, and 220 speed. I started with 1 Whismur horde, and then I KO'd 5 more individually after that. Then I moved on to 2 Sandshrew for defense. After that was 3 Oddish hordes, followed by 4 individual Oddish. Then I KO'd 2 Swablu for special defense, and finally I did 5 hordes of Zigzagoon to wrap up the training for speed. This took about 22 minutes total. EV training is so good in this game. I can't explain it, but it hits the perfect sweet spot for me. It doesn't take too long to train a single Pokemon, and it still feels like I'm playing the game. In Sword and Shield, yeah, it's faster, but you just dump a bunch of vitamins into the Pokemon. You're not really playing the game. So I don't know, I just like this. It's a nice sweet spot. All in all, this took me 2 hours and 23 minutes to train my entire team. Not too shabby, I don't think. Oh ho. This took 3 hours and 27 minutes in Gen 4. That's a pretty big time save. I think this is a solid improvement over that. But our new total time after this is all over is 61 hours and 39 minutes, even longer than Gen 4's total time at this point. With our Pokemon fully trained, we have to get them to the proper level for battle, which is 50, and some of our Pokemon need to learn a few level up moves and evolve. This is just done by spamming Blisy bases. In case you've not known what I meant by Blisy bases this whole time, it's pretty simple. In this game, you can make a personal hideout called the Secret Base, and then you could trade that base to other players' games via QR codes on the internet. 2 areas in specific, the Secret Meadow and Secret Shore, have a bunch of these bases really close together. So what the community did was come together and make QR codes to fill all of these bases up, and all the trainers in these bases have level 100 Blissys with a Toxic Orb item and no attacking moves. This gives an ungodly amount of experience points and is by far the fastest way to level up in these games. Case in point, this only took me 24 minutes using the XP share to get my entire team to level 50 and beyond. Alrighty, now that everyone is buff and a high enough level, I have to give them all the proper moves and evolve them if need be. Pikachu was first. I had a Thunderstone from somewhere, I don't remember, and I evolved her and then taught her Volt Switch via TM, and she was done. I tackled Haunter next, who only needed TMs. I already had the Will-O-Wisp TM from the story playthrough, so I just had to fly to Dewford to get Sludge Bomb, buy Protect from the Lily Cove department store, and beat the first Trick House room to get Taunt, and that's all his moves done. Rayquaza was up next, and all I had to do was fly to Lava Ridge to get the Swords Dance TM, and then I taught that to it along with Protect. Rayquaza's done. Hitmontop was next, and all I needed to do for him was teach him close combat via the move reminder. All his other moves were obtained via level up. After that, I dealt with Bronzong, who I gave Trick Room to. I had to beat level 3 of the Trick House to get that TM. Then I had to trade both Kyogre and Haunter to my copy of Y version. Haunter was to evolve, but Kyogre was because in X and Y it learns Water Spout at level 50 instead of level 90 in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So I sent it over with the Heart Scale and taught it Water Spout, and then I traded it back and used another Heart Scale to teach it Origin Pulse again in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because you have to delete that move to send it over to X and Y. The final move is Skill Swap, an 8 BP move tutor move in the Battle Resort. So I went into the double battles mode and gave it a go. 8 victories later, I've got enough BP and paused my streak. Getting all the moves and evolving took around an hour total. The Trick House took a bunch of time up, and so did the trading over to Y version. Our total time for leveling, moves, and evolving was 1 hour and 24 minutes. Gen 4? Oh, just a simple 9 hours and 3 minutes. Holy crap. This is a huge time save. Gen 4 has a bunch of super expensive move tutor moves. TMs aren't reusable. Truly brutal back then. This is a huge improvement. With that, our total gameplay clock is standing at 63 hours and 7 minutes. Next up is our items. I've got a few already, actually. The Blue Orb, Kyogre's item, is an item that you need to get in the story. I've also got Gengarite naturally while exploring the Battle Resort. So I only need the Eject Button, Assault Vest, Focus Sash, and a Lumberry. The first 3 items here are all BP items only. I need 32 for the Eject Button and 48 for the Vest and Sash each. This is, unfortunately, a simple grind in the Battle Maison. I decided to do double battles to give myself like a small taste of what this team is, but unfortunately, you can only bring 4 Pokemon, and Rayquaza and Kyogre are banned here. So I ended up bringing my Swampert from the story along with the Hitmontop, Gengar, and Raichu. I also gave Gengar Thunderbolt instead of Taunt, which is not a huge deal since TMs are reusable, so I can just give him the proper moveset later again. First up is the Eject Button, and I picked my streak up where I left it off, and I battled until I beat the head of the Maison double. This granted me more than enough points for the Eject Button. Gengar and Swampert are really an excellent team because of the Earthquake and Levitate combo. In the end, this run took me about 24 minutes. Now I have to do it 2 more times. I opted not to do super doubles because I really do not think the team without the 2 legends is good enough to do well there. So I ended up just beating the regular double challenge 2 more times. It's a bit uninteresting, and they both took almost the exact same amount of time, at 39 minutes for the Assault Vest and 41 minutes for the Focus Sash. The last item I needed was the Lumberry, which was a 3.5 minute detour to the Berry Master's house. All in all, this took 1 hour and 47 minutes. Kind of a long time, but not too bad. In Gen 4, this took me 1 hour and 59 minutes. A slim improvement. Gen 4 here had a lot of items you could just get from the ground though, whereas here I had to do a bunch of BP grinding. Even if it's faster than Gen 4, it really bogged the pace of the item acquisition down. And that's it, right? All the items, all the moves, on all the Pokemon at all the proper level. At 64 hours and 56 minutes, this took way... None of my moves have been PP maxed or have even gotten any PP ups. These items increase the number of times you can click a specific move. You can either use 1 PP max to fully max out the move, or you could use 3 PP ups. These items are extremely rare, and it's not easy to get a lot of them. Now, before I talk about this section, I want to give a disclaimer here. There are 2 ways to buy PP ups I basically can't use. The Global Link, a defunct online service, used to let you buy PP ups for 500 Pokemiles each. You can spend Pokemiles in-game to get them, but they're literally double the price at 1,000 Pokemiles each. In addition, I am not utilizing Pokemon Bank. Pokemon Bank passively racks up Pokemiles every day for you. And I also have a ton of Pokemon with different TIDs in Bank, and I'd probably have gained a lot of miles if I had used this, as well as had the opportunity to test different TIDs on the daily to see if the lottery could win a PP up for me every day. So because I'm not using Pokemon Bank to get a buttload of Pokemiles, I am not sure how representative this section is of the average player's experience. For as long as I can remember, I've just had Pokemon in the bank and basically got an infinite amount of Pokemiles without thinking about it. But using it for this challenge specifically felt unfair. So let me know in the comments what your experience was. Besides, if you were younger, less fortunate to be able to afford Bank, or didn't have older Pokemon games, this feature wouldn't help you too much anyway. Alright, with that said, I decided it was my best interest to test out every single method of getting PP ups that I could think of in this game. First, I tried Wonder Trade spam. Every time you do a Wonder Trade, you get some Pokemiles. So I thought maybe just spam trading would be enough to get Pokemiles to buy PP ups. However, it became very apparent quickly that this was not the way to go. After just 10 minutes of trading, I didn't even have 1,000 Pokemiles. I had 800. This would average to like 4 or 5 PP ups an hour, and depending on how lucky I was, this is like what, fastest possible 15 hours? Probably not even, that's like a generous estimate. So I moved on to my next idea, pickup plus rematch grinding. You see, the Brains and Bronze duo on Route 119 have a 5% chance to give you a PP max every time you defeat them, and you can save and reset in front of them until you get it. So I first leveled up all my goons into Lanoons and got them to level 81 plus. At that level, they had around a 3% chance to find a PP up after every battle. So what I would do is run around doing pickup grinding until the trainers would want a rematch. Then I would save and soft reset until I either got a PP max from them or a PP up from my Lanoon. I did this for like an hour and got 1 PP up and 1 PP max. This is not bad, but it can be very luck prone. The next method I did was super training. The final level of secret super training can give you 8 different items. two of which are desirable, either a PP max or a PP up. Cerebi says the game differentiates between top and medium scores, where only a medium score gives out PP max and up, but I have no idea what this means, and I couldn't find it anywhere online other than his website. On top of that, my score definitely doesn't seem to matter. No matter how fast or slow I did it, I could get ones that said top score, or I could get ones that said medium score. After an hour of this, I got exactly 1 PP up, so it didn't seem worth it to me. Final method I tried was the Battle Institute. This is a similar facility to the Battle Maison, but the way it distributes rewards is very different. You have to do 5 battles in a row, win or lose, and you get scored in points and stars based on how well you do. If you come out with 6,000 or more points, you gain 15 battle points and a PP up. This one has a lot of potential and may have even been the most consistent method, but I just didn't have the quality of Pokemon I needed to win the 6,000 points every time. By the 4th round, they start using legendaries, like the Battle Maison heads do, and my team is not strong enough to win without significant point loss, so I never got 1 PP up from this method. I decided the best way was the pickup plus rematch idea. Maybe this was a mistake, because this took me in total 17 hours. The big problem with this plan was that the Brains and Brawn duo just did not want to rematch me that often, and the match call feature is like bugged or something. It routinely says that they aren't ready for battle, but I could talk to them and they would battle me. I don't really know what's up with it, but with all that done, I can use all my PP ups and maxes on my team, and at 85 hours and 25 minutes, we're done. I think the PP ups and the PP maxes are something, in this gen anyway, they intend for you to get passively over a really long period of time through Bank and Wonder Trade, while you do other things like EV Train and Breed. Even if you discount all my PP up acquisition, this still took 4 hours longer than Gen 4. Why? Did they make it even worse? Well, no, not really. As silly as it sounds, for the most part, I believe this is an improvement over what Gen 4 offered. You see, in my Gen 4 and 5 team building videos, you 100% absolutely need to use RNG manipulation, or you cannot get perfect Pokemon. And while I think RNG manipulation is really cool, and also do not even think it's cheating or exploitative, I do not think players should have to learn complex mechanics about the way the game does math to make itself seem more random, just so they could compete on a fair playing field. On top of that, getting all the moves and leveling up was so easy here that I combined them into one section. In Gen 4, they were 2 separate sections because the TM and move tutor situation was so awful back then. Even the items, if you take a look, it looks like Gen 6 barely has the edge. But when you just go a little bit deeper, in Gen 4, I got 1 16 BP item in an hour and 10 minutes. Everything else was items off the floor from Thief or whatever. Here, I did 2 48 BP grinds and 1 32 BP grind faster than that. That's a huge improvement. This game and all its enhancements make it possible for anyone to breed 5 IV Pokemon easily, and they make it possible for anyone to reset for 5 IV legendaries and get whatever items you need without that much hassle. Like, think about it. The odds of Kyogre and Rayquaza in this game are more common than finding a shiny. Compare that to Gen 4, where it was literally a 1 in 160 million chance to find the Groudon I needed back then. Then, you'd have to do Battle Tower for 2 hours to get the focus sash you needed. It was miserable. Is it still too much? Absolutely. But Gen 6 was a big step in the right direction, and this was a very pleasant experience after I got all the static encounters done. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what gen you'd like to see next in the comments below, and how difficult or easy your experience in Gen 6 was. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. I want to do a big shout out to all of my channel members. Thank you guys so much. Without your support, I couldn't be producing as many videos as I am, and I couldn't be streaming as often as I am. So it really means a lot to me. And special shout out to ShadowBliss56 and RLIZT, my Bliss God tier members. Your generosity is unbelievable. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you all next video.